want to leave the door open or closed? Why don't we leave it open? That's fine. They're coming back.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to the Model United Nations versus the Hampton Union Philanthropic Society and the debates of whether or not a woman's place is in the home. The people who will be debating for us for Hollins include Jacqueline Witt, President Jacqueline Kennedy, Jacqueline Witt, Taylor Cook, and Aaron Feisty. And the young men who will be debating with us from Hampton, Sydney include J. Michael Torres, Ross Green, and J. Robert Harper the First. And I'd also like to remind you that this is purely an academic debate. None of the points of views uttered by our debaters this evening are their personal points of views. They're just doing it to show you have all a good time. Well, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy it.
I'm Jacqueline Kennedy. I'm the Vice President of the club, and my job is to facilitate and make sure that everything stays civil
Civil and orderly. We'll try. I'd like to start off by thanking all of you for letting us come out here tonight. This is probably going to be very fun. This is an excellent opportunity for us gentlemen and scholars of the Union Philanthropic Society to instruct our female brethren on an argument that is perhaps far past due to examination and affirmation. So, without further ado, I think I'm ready to begin. A famous Irish poet, playwright, author, and critic, Oscar Wilde once wrote that the book of life starts with a man and a woman in a garden. And of course, it ends with revelations. This garden that I'm referring to, of course, is the Garden of Eden. And as far as the Garden of Eden story is concerned, I'm really more interested in crediting my sources Milton's Paradise Lost and not the book of Genesis per se, because it's a little crude. To answer any ethical or universal problem, and surely the proper conduct of family and marriage is one of these, we need to identify our textbook or the source of wisdom that we wish to glean upon this or any other topic. And I'm purposely taking this argument out of the standard matrix of rights language, I can type of attitude, and towards a more, well, you'll see where I'm going with this. It's going to be fun. Which, to be honest, I'm doing this to take it out of the standard matrix of institutional socialization, which I feel comes from reading too much Marx and not enough Milton. I refuse to accept the current Marxist and feminist standard that somehow our values, our behaviors, and basically who we are completely the result of some social or economic construction. I don't buy that for a minute, and I really don't see how anyone could. Simply for the fact that men, as well as women, we're endowed with reason and choice. And that choice in and of itself is indeed a good. It's a wonderful thing. And I support the notion that women as well as men deserve and have the ability to choose what they want to do with their lives. Yet to affirm the necessity of the freedom of choice is not to affirm the equality of decisions one can make. That is to say, I can decide to throw my shoe through a window, or I can decide not to. I have that choice because I'm a rational, I'm a human being. But that doesn't mean that the choice to throw my shoe through a window is viable as my decision not to. I think that's a pretty clear case. And I'll show you where I'm going with this. Basically, those are fighting words, because you have to believe in your heart of hearts that there is a right and that there is a wrong. And I, for one, we all refuse to accept the arguments of moral relativism that are just so casually used today. When we examine the social and ethical, particularly gender-oriented issues, we often do so under the pretext of this, what I referred to earlier as rights language. That is to say, the domestic spheres in which we all, men and women, are part of, necessitates that we abandon this sort of self-enthrallment that is particularly popular in American culture to a system in which all parties are engaged in a sort of mutual service. As a nation, as a human community, as people. It's apparent that our culture is in a complete disarray right now, especially when you look at its attempt to rationalize the horrific behaviors of its own youth and the moral vacuum that sort of surrounds that. We want to blame video games, we want to blame, Eminem and all sorts of ridiculous nonsense, when actually what it comes down to is that our culture really doesn't have a very clear, unified, concrete understanding of what it means to be a parent. And that's really where we're starting off with here. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that a lack of love and involvement created by a parent is really the sort of a problem where all this comes from, and a lot of this comes from the necessity or the perceived necessity of a two-income household, which actually takes us back to where I was starting with the Garden of Eden, like I said. When the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve's labors were shared. Shared, that's a very key point that I like to make. And the mistake that Eve makes, and surely Adam is culpable for this as well, but the mistake they make is that they believe that they can defeat Satan on their own. And of course this is metaphorical, but the point to make is that both Adam and Eve, both man and woman, husband and wife, mother and father, however you want to read into this little story, are only strong enough to do so when they're supported by each other. In the same way, men and women, husband and wife, mother and father, we're not meant to operate as autonomous entities, but rather as a complete unit. And this makes so much sense. I mean, why else are you going to be married if you're going to be your own person and not a part of this larger endeavor that we refer to as family, that we refer to as nation and community, and so forth. Another obvious point that's clear just from looking around this room is that men cannot be mothers. There's no uterus involved there. Well, there's not. There isn't. And motherhood, in particular, and all that motherhood entails, is an experience into itself that we as men don't have complete knowledge of, or certainly cannot relate 100% within the same way to where the point where you'd understand and have the experience ourselves. Eve is not inferior to Adam. Women are not inferior to men. It is not the case that women are incapable of succeeding in the workplace. We find that in fact, quite the opposite is the case. But that's really sort of beside the point, because in the absence of child-raising commitments, which, yes, the father must play an active role, although conceivably different, there's no reason that a woman cannot contribute to the welfare of herself, her community, and the workplace. I mean, so we have established, more or less, that the responsibility of a child necessitates that priorities in one's life, and in the lives that one lives with, have to be arranged accordingly. So the question really is, how do we arrange these priorities? Someone has to solve this problem to provide the attention, the love, and the direction that children need. So who's it going to be? As far as my opposition may refer to as male-dominated institutions, patriarchal oppressors, and all of that sort of thing, I don't see really little reason at all to care whether social construction theory is right or whether social construction theory is wrong. If it is right, we can question whether or not this is a bad thing. Men are more aggressive in the workplace, in the environment, and part of our brains, if you will. We feel an inborn desire to serve our wives and children by providing for them as best as we can. And in fact, a lot of people even pride themselves on this sort of endeavor. And although this is by no means the extent of our obligations, it's obvious that even though a father has to go to the workplace and provide for his family, that if you're a father and you're not active in your son or your daughter's life, they tend to have problems and go to Columbine and shoot a whole bunch of people because they feel bad about themselves. If it's wrong, this social construct theory that we are mindless automatons that are just designed by social institutions, and we don't have any real choice or reason or independence in our own. If this is wrong, then this desire is inborn, not because of the way society is constructed, not because of any political or social or economic institutions, but simply because it's a trait of the human condition, lingering from the Garden of Eden or the creation story, or however you want to call it. And I use the Garden of Eden not in a strictly religious sense as this sort of patriarchal or repressive thing, but that it is, in a sense, a story that one can look into and sort of universalize the human condition in a way that it allows us to look at how men and women work and sort of relate to all various sorts of situations. I mean, we recognize that the world is not perfect, that because in an ideal situation, that was fun.
Good evening. It is not my desire tonight to talk about institutions, about what is right and what is wrong. Instead, I want to focus on what should be, on what is ideal. Women working is not a new idea, nor is it a rejection of tradition. In developing nations, women sell goods in markets. During the Industrial Revolution in the United States, women provided the vital labor for textile mills. Women have always worked in agriculture. During the Second World War, women entered the workforce in droves in order to support a wartime economy. Historically, fields such as teaching, nursing, clerical work have been and continue to be dominated by women. In the 1970s, as the divorce rate skyrocketed, women again looked for work outside of the home. Today, over 60% of all women are part of the workforce in the United States and comprise roughly 40% of the total workforce, often not of necessity, to sustain themselves, their children, and at times a nation. Women go to work. However, today, in a strong economy with excellent opportunities available for education, with a population growth rate of well under 1%, and as women choose to marry and have children later, there is a more important issue. That is the issue of choice. Unfortunately for many women, such an option does not exist. Many lower-income women are forced to stay home due to high child care and transportation costs and a lack of education skills. In fact, women currently make up 60% of all minimum wage workers. Any income these women do produce usually goes directly into child care and transportation costs, thereby negating the financial benefits and societal advancement. Other women are forced to stay home due to psychological and physical abuse. But just because these women are in the home does not follow logically that their place is in the home. Reality rarely reflects the ideal. The same problem exists for women who are forced to go to work for economic necessity of supporting a family. However, when there is a lack of choice, everyone suffers. Businesses lose valuable labor and brain power. Children are left in unstable environments, and the psychological pressure on women to perform grows. When women choose to stay in the home, neither economic nor social regression is an automatic occurrence. Such a choice to stay at home can only be made after considering many factors. Both women and men with children must use rational logic to examine the economic, familial, personal, psychological consequences of any decision. While striking an individually desirable balance between these factors is very difficult, it can be done. And when choices are made responsibly with the idea of balance between career, dreams, and family in mind, society undoubtedly benefits. In the United States, single women and women without children have an easier choice, it seems. It is estimated that in 2001, 60% of all undergraduate degrees will be awarded to women. Strides continue to be made in the number of women entering traditionally male-dominated fields, such as science, engineering, medicine, and foreign service. To suggest that these women, many of them intellectual leaders, community activists, business leaders, and professionals, should stay home simply based on their gender is a difficult proposal to substantiate. Even if it is conceded that these women should be able to freely work outside of the home, the question becomes, is a successful woman then required to leave her career simply because of the addition of a spouse or children into her life. Surely we would not expect the same for a male. Economic and social regression, however, emerges when women are categorically and without exception placed into the home. Compare, for example, the situation in Afghanistan 20 years ago to the situation in Afghanistan today. 20 years ago, the country was at the point of economic takeoff. The society was ready to enter the first world. Women served as doctors, teachers, lawyers, and other professionals. While the respect for women who choose to stay home remains sacred under Islamic thought, the freedom to allow women to work and function freely in society advanced the nation as a whole. However, under the fundamentalist control of the Taliban, Afghani society has regressed immeasurably. Women are now forced to stay home. They do not receive adequate medical care due to the complete lack of female practitioners. Economically and socially, Afghanistan is in trouble. This trend is due in large part to the complete forced withdrawal of women from actively participating in society. When women choose to work, they do reap psychological and physical benefits. A 1991 study reports that employed women were happier in their overall situation than women who stayed in the home. In 1992, a medical study reported that employed women had a lower risk for heart disease and other health problems than their homemaker counterparts. Both men and women interviewed in 1998 cited financial resources as the major benefit of having two incomes. Women also cite personal fulfillment, intellectual equality, and emotional support as advantages to working outside of the home. And most women said they would continue working even if they felt there was no financial need to do so. These benefits were seen in light of studies that report increased stress and fatigue among women. The United States Department of Labor reports that the movement of women into the workforce has not been accompanied by a complementary shift of men into greater participation in household work. Often, when women look for work, they cite flexibility and equality as major factors in their decisions. Women have not forgotten or ignored their unpaid responsibility as mothers, volunteers, or activists. As women continue to contribute to the domestic, social, economic, intellectual, and cultural advancement of society, their efforts must be matched by similar decision-making and responsibility sharing on the part of males. In the end, the important factor remains choice. In a nation founded on the principles of freedom, the pursuit of happiness, and equality, we must allow for choice. No doors should be closed because one half of society is unwilling to share in the responsibility of raising children, earning a living, and advancing. Choices regarding the balance of family and career must be conscious ones, made by both men and women. Society functions best when there is cooperation, shared responsibility, and trust between genders. By withdrawing women from the workforce or men from the home, a society will grossly fail to reach its full potential. A woman's place is that where she feels comfortable and takes a participatory role in all that she does. For some women, that place is in the home. For others, it is in the workforce. And for others, being in their place requires a delicate balance between the two. But one thing is consistent: a woman's place cannot be dictated to her by others.
Just like to say before I start that just about anything I say is probably for humor or erudition, and I'll apologize for some things I've done previously in the interest of this speech. Now, everybody that knows me and the people that I've just met that I had dinner with today has probably seen me at some point or another be horribly uncouth or absolutely out of control, and a certain person in the audience has seen it on many occasions. Now, what this comes to is why I happen to be like this. During the course of my education at college and school, society has provided me with a set of mores or values that I act upon, and I'm generally received as cautious and a kind person. And then occasionally people see me make a comment and wish to throttle me. What it comes down to is I didn't have any home training. I was raised by a television. And not to preach the evils of the television or anything along that kind. It's more of an evil of lack, an evil that I had no mother around because both of my parents worked to pay the bills. and both of my little brothers happened to turn out much better because they actually got some familiar care, and I kind of had to learn how to reach the cereal when I was about 3 from the refrigerator. What it comes down to is that the previous speaker's argument is a gross fallacy for 2 reasons. It comes down to the fact that why is a woman being in the home inherently evil? Is a woman being a homemaker something to be damned, something to be hated, something to be looked down upon? Is it not useful to society? If every woman got to advance herself to a certain position, every woman got to achieve her status as a professional, which this place seems to be highly occupied with, then we very quickly either stop reproducing due to lack of occasional meetings, or every one of our children would seem to be those horrible things. You seem to think that, oh, how did that mother produce such a horrible person when you see a school shooting or see child crime or anything like that? It's because they had no familial input. Why is being a mother evil? Is being a mother not a job? Is being a homemaker not a job? If you told either one of my grandmothers who raised loads of children with no opportunity for advancement that they didn't have a job, they would probably smack you with a frying pan until you died. So that takes care of that. I mean, being a homemaker is a job. It is necessary to society. And the second fallacy in the previous speaker's argument was the difference between choice and not choice. Our previous lead-off speakers put forth that choice is inherent to our argument. There has to be a choice to determine a woman's place in the home. If a woman has no choice and is arbitrarily forced into the home, then this argument is moot because she has no other place to go. And if she's a single mother, this argument is moot because that comes into the realm of government subsidy. She has no choice other than to work to support her children. And a woman who has no children at all yet is with a man, argument is still moot because she's free to pursue any goal she wishes. We've already admitted that. That's not a problem. What it comes down to is economics. You have women and men, and in our affirmative statement we put forth that this has to do with the nuclear family, a man, a woman, and progeny. We won't go into homosexuals with adopted progeny, as that's not concerned in this argument right now. And what it comes down to is who can provide the best care for the children to result in the best for society. And it comes down to, if you admit through the social construct theory that women are oppressed in the workplace, women receive less wage, women have a glass ceiling, then shouldn't women be in the home? Because men can provide best. With women out of the workplace, men in the workplace can bring more money to the household and provide more for the family, while the woman is home providing a necessary service, and it's a service she can enjoy. Why is it evil? Why has society come up with this construct to reduce the oppression of women? To reduce the oppression of women when it's an institution that is inherently good and continues the progress of the species. I think that wraps up my remarks.
I guess we need silence in between the speakers instead of like giggling and laughter. And during when their speakers decibel.
All right. Many of the same studies and life experiences that can be used to support the theory that mother needs to stay in the home for the sake of the children and the betterment of their mental health go on to admit the fact that the important factor in the development of a child is not the identity of the caregiver, but rather the continuity and quality of the care given. In most traditional sense, this is a stay-at-home mom, but it can also be a stay-at-home dad. However, if both parents want or need to work, it can be done without inflicting harm to the child's development, as long as the child is in a stable, continuous care environment. This means a good, professional, long-term child care provider can be a perfectly acceptable solution for working parents. Studies have shown that in fatherless homes, male children are more than twice as likely to be adolescent delinquents, and female children are also twice as likely to become teen mothers. Now this is a fatherless home, but it serves to illustrate the fact that a positive male role model in the family is of great importance. Considering the fact that the average father in America spends less than 0.4 hours a day with his children, as compared to the 10.5 hours spent with mothers, it is hard to say that these children could not also be considered fatherless as well. In today's society, the importance of strong male role models for children cannot be underestimated. If it is automatically assumed that the mother's responsibility for the home and children, the father is more likely to feel pressured to go ahead and work in order to provide for his family, thus reducing the time he spends at home. Each parent must take an active role in the development of a child. Forcing the woman to stay at home lessens the importance of the male role models for the children.
We've heard quite a bit about ideals, and any political scientist understands what has been proven through history by even the most ideal attempts at reformation, reforming to the political ideal. In this case, it's a social ideal, and that is what should or shouldn't be, what the ideal solution is, or what the opposition has proposed is an acceptable solution. What our argument is girded upon is the reasoning that, one, there is no ideal in human life. Two, you need to accept things as they are, and that being the essential question is, where are we now and what are we to do about it? Our argument there stems from both avenues of logic that come from feminist thought, and that is the essentialist argument and the argument for social construction. The essentialist argument being that there is a direct link between behavior and gender, and that shapes the reality around us. The social construction argument argues that through our environmental influences or the social constructs that we create, we get our behavior. Beginning with ideals. Feminist argument always stems from the reasoning put forth in the Enlightenment. Freedom, equality, liberation, choice. Taken to an extreme, that reasoning leads to Marxism. What Marx promised was complete equality. Marx promised complete choice. Marx removed all elements of alienation from economic and social life. Indeed, the ideals of the feminist movement, either through essentialism or social construction. Either of these must be true. That is what feminism argues for. And no doubt these are admirable, but they are not realistic. How is this proven? One, all Marxist rulers had the maximum amount of power available to them. And what happened? They failed. There are a variety of arguable reasons for why they failed, but they did fail, which indicates nonetheless that simple ideals cannot fuel a successful revolution. We also see this in the French Revolution. It's very evident in the fact that their reasoning was completely fueled almost in a methamphetaminical way by the reasoning of the Enlightenment. So given that ideals aren't necessarily attainable, and arguably they're not attainable in our situation here, what is the question that we're left with? The question that we're left with is, what is our situation? Well, the situation is America's youth needs attention, America's youth needs guidance, and not communal guidance. We are in the absence of federally subsidized child care. And on the same token, the argument posed by the opposition is that it's not necessarily the individual identity of the caregiver, but simply that there's care. I would argue that my kids ought to reflect somewhat me, that I should have some direct hand in their upbringing, and that I should be in some way active in the guidance and the forming of their life and their behaviors. The opposition would argue that if they're being cared for in any fashion, if they're receiving the love and attention that they deserve, that this is okay. This, as well, is a Marxist argument and was actually precluded by Plato, who brought it up in the Republic with the communization of children. Through the ideals of liberty, which Plato directly identified with, we will let people find out what they're best at and pursue that in society, leaving their kids at home. And what happens? It doesn't work. You have people with a loss of identity and a communal sense of identity that doesn't relate directly to any individual, which I would argue is destructive to the family institution. It's the longest sentence I can. The question is, what should we do, semicolon, we're faced with an economic question based on economic theory that the lower wage earner, not necessarily the weaker or more sensitive or more caregiving individual, ought to stay in the home, semicolon. Feminism argues, either through essentialism or through social construction, that the status quo isn't meeting what we need. Women still make 80 cents on the male dollar, the glass ceiling still supposedly exists, and that equality hasn't yet been achieved. So if we're dealing with right here and right now, comma, women need to stay at home.
First, I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Green's claim of a lack of parental care. I'd like to remind Mr. Green and to tell you about a lady named Ruby. Ruby cleaned Mr. Green's house and cared for Mr. Green and his brothers. Ruby was with the Green family for quite some time and provided the consistency that Ms. Cook explained was necessary in providing care for children. There are too many intelligent, talented women in the world to restrict them only to the domestic scene. The 1950s ideal of Harriet Nelson doing her laundry and vacuuming in a dress, heels, and pearls should no longer be a reality. The modern woman can successfully manage a career and a family without giving either anything less than her very best. If men and women equally divided the domestic responsibilities, working women would more efficiently balance their careers and their home lives. This premise is referred to as the independent utility function. Currently, many working women feel pressure from society and from their partners to be superwoman. That is, to have a Martha Stewart-inspired home, perfectly behaved, well-adjusted children, and a successful career. It's possible to have all of these things if a woman so chooses, but she cannot go it alone. If their domestic partners share the load, women open themselves up for more promotions and increased salaries at work, resulting in a higher joint income and boosted family economic status. Women don't work because they seek to harm their families. The mental and intellectual stimulation of a career in an interesting field is vital to a person's self-esteem and mental health. Assuming that women comprise roughly half of the population, why should we automatically remove half the brain power from the workforce? Reducing competition for jobs would allow less capable individuals access to jobs in which thinking and problem-solving ability count. Intelligence is not gender-based. As college students and people involved in college communities, we all know that equality education is an expensive proposition. It does not make fiscal sense for a woman to spend thousands of dollars investing in her education only to cease doing something she loves when she marries or has a child. Student loans are an unfortunate reality for many new graduates, and children are expensive to provide for. Reducing a couple's combined income at marriage or the birth of a child would have very detrimental effects on their finances at a crucial time. There are many available compromises to allow women to choose to have it all. Telecommuting allows a woman scheduling flexibility and more time in her home. Job sharing, when two people work part-time to fill one full-time position, has benefits for both the employees and the employer. The employees gain time at home, while the employer benefits financially, as generally the benefits package, such as health insurance, for two part-time employees is much less costly than the benefits package offered to a full-time employee. Many family-friendly businesses offer in-house child care centers, allowing the mother or the father to check on the child during breaks from work. The situation of Dr. Ann Hayes Pryor, a veterinarian from Charlotte, North Carolina, is an example of how businesses and employers can work together to maintain the balance in a woman's life. After 8 years of higher education, Dr. Pryor became the fourth doctor in a suburban small animal practice. When she married, Dr. Pryor continued to work full-time. She recently had her first child. In order to spend more time with her baby daughter, Dr. Pryor scaled back to working fewer hours per week. Meanwhile, the practice was ready to grow, but not quite at the point of requiring 5 full-time doctors. An additional full-time practitioner was hired and neatly complements Dr. Pryor's choice to stay current in her field and spend quality time with her daughter. Having women in the workforce actually makes a company stronger. Women make the majority of consumer decisions, and they can help companies better understand their markets. Gender diversity at the executive level helps a business make more educated corporate decisions and improves the bottom line. Firms in which women held the majority of executive positions showed greater sales growth than firms where men predominate in management, according according to a poll conducted by the Business and Professional Women of the United States. In an ideal world, a woman's place is wherever she chooses it to be. That may be at home, in the workforce, or some combination of these. But ultimately, a woman's place should reflect the personal balance of priorities and responsible decisions that she has struck in her life. Women can make corporations just as successfully as they can make homes, and they should be given the opportunity to choose which endeavor, or both, they wish to pursue.
Okay, now we're going to have a participant question period, and we'd like each team to separate off to the sides so that you can ask one another questions.
How would the opposition respond to our argument posed that the ideal is not attainable?
I think that the major argument is that any choice that is made does have to be based in reality, that there is no way to completely separate the two. And like we insisted that choices must be made responsibly as a pair. You also suggested that we are not automatron, that we must function as a unit, and we encourage that a husband and a wife should work together to achieve what is most desirable for the family as a whole as well as for the individual, and that must be based in reality.
The argument is also negated by the fact that just looking at how much progress has been made in the past 50 years, it's unbelievable. And if you continue that same progress, equality can be achieved.
You said that your argument did not include single women or women without children, correct? How then do you suggest, what is the period of, say, average age for marriage now is 28 for a woman? What does she do from the time that she graduates high school at 18, 10 years later? What is that 10-year period for, and what does that experience go to once, as you suggest, she moves back into the home?
I think that's two questions. The first question, why did we remove those two from our analysis of it? And that's because within both the homosexual argument and with the single parent adopting argument, you don't have a clash between the male argument and the female argument. Our whole purpose here is to identify the logic behind that, and it's linked to the Enlightenment. And because there's no real clash, but you don't have a husband disagreeing, there isn't really a clash. You just sort of have an argument for socialization or federal subsidization, which we sort of excluded from our argument. So the reason we excluded it was because of that. There's no clash there. There really wouldn't be anything for us to argue about because we would both agree on the ideal. And for your second question, I would have to pull back to our point that the ideal isn't attainable, and that we have to look at how things really are and what is actually practical and not what should be. Because we can always talk about what should be, but we have failed continuously to achieve it. So.
If I could add onto that, the 10-year gap, 18 to 28 or whatever, however, you're referring to, I think you're trying to debate it. It's obviously split into higher education, and a lot of the argument was made, well, how do you expect us to invest in an education and then sort of temporarily take ourselves off the job market or whatever? And I would propose that the true value of an education is not necessarily learning how to crunch numbers, learning how to make a trade in and of oneself. Is it simply education is simply a good for all human beings simply on the fact that they live better lives and become more morally enlightened people. And along with that, then surely that 10-year time period is very well spent and indeed particularly useful in a household, particularly when the arguments have been made concerning progress. It'd really be interesting to know how you define progress in a society that seems to have morally and rationally collapsed within the last 50 years.
Mr. Torres.
Oh.
Mr. Torres.
No, it's not.
Well, since we did state that we weren't arguing in an ideal society, the opposition stands very heavily upon the fact that women can reach some kind of desired equality in the workplace while leaving their children to qualified caregivers. And someone did put forth that I did have a nanny who I loved and who took good care of me. Yet that doesn't stop the point that we had another nanny who was a kleptomaniac psychopath who stole our silverware and brought a pistol to kill us one day. So, wrong with it. How does the opposition respond to the fact that, one, if leaving one's progeny in care of a caregiver can guarantee that the correct set of morals and values are transmitted directly to that child when you yourself are not transmitting them?
Mr. Green brings up an interesting point. And the key to choosing a child care provider is obviously to ask the appropriate questions before making the hiring decision. It might not have been apparently crazy when his mother interviewed her. There are hidden camera sort of systems that can be hidden in a home so that a parent can observe his or her child care provider on the job unnoticed. While their constitutional legality might be debated, they're a valuable tool in making sure that your children are with the appropriate person. Also, it stands to reason that currently the average parent spends over 50 hours a week, many spend 60 hours a week at work. If both parents are not feeling so much pressure to bring home so much money, it stands to reason that they will spend more time at home. Therefore, leaving children with caregivers for part of the day is perfectly adequate as long as there must be some parental guidance and care for children.
Just as we turn, the speaker just pointed out our own argument for us, and that if the women were in the home to give care, then there would be less load upon each person due to the less work pool, there would be higher wages for the men, etc.
When does the mother's responsibility as a caregiver stop?
I can start. I'll let you finish. Obviously, well, with death, so y'all should get a good start now. But really, it's a matter of intensity. Obviously, you care for a newborn differently than you care for a 15-year-old child as far as attention and all of which is concerned. It's an irrefutable scientific fact that younger children need more attention, need more guidance, need more contact, time, love, Pokemon, whatever, around. And simply put, that a woman's responsibility or as a mother is something that develops. It's not a static thing. It's a development in the same way that a marriage is a development, that a career is a development, that an intellectual study is a development. It's something that's undertaken but developed across time. I think I'm being nudged.
Yes, I know where Mr. Torres is going, and I think the answer to the speaker's question is that it never does in the correct sense, because every child at some point breaks away from their mother's apron strings, or else they end up like that guy in Psycho with his mother involved in the basement. But you eventually break away from your mother's total control of your life. But if you have a mother in the correct sense, she always remains a force in your life, taking care of you. You always have somewhere to go home to. And Mr. Torres has said to death, but everyone knows that when they have someone who dies close to them, that person doesn't necessarily go away or end their function upon your life. So I think if a mother acts in the correct fashion, she'll never leave in a caring role probably.
Would it then, as you suggested, Ms. Torres at 15, you said there's a point where they break away. At that point, is it appropriate for a mother to go to work?
As far as the age is going, I just picked one out of the air just to illustrate obvious difference between the stages of childhood. And I don't think it's appropriate or even responsible to give a numerical value for that, because each child is different, each mother is different. Really, I think that rather than ask the question, when can I go ahead and do this? I think the mother should really be more thinking along the lines of am I ready to do this? Are my children ready for me to leave them? or not necessarily leave them, but take the mother-child relationship to a more less or a less intensive level.
Just as a follow-up to Ms. Torres' statement, I'd also say that there's no way that you can put an arbitrary date or time or anything, or even a span in which a mother can break off from caring for her child. There's no way to do it, because if you'll view our society, every way in which the government or society creates a time or a date where you get to do a certain thing, society is brutally mutilated by that date. As in, you get to buy cigarettes at 18, or you get to drink at 21, and everybody wants to drink themselves into a coma, and everybody else I know after 21, except for the large amount of alcoholics, pretty much get back to moderation instead of that like 8-beer beer bong.
Okay, there was a statement in one of your speeches about the fact that women that they can have it all, that they can be superwoman, mother, and corporate powerhouse, and all of that, and that they shouldn't be allowed to sacrifice this for their children or however. What I would like to know is, at what age or at what point are you going to sit down and tell your child, A, that you are not enough, and really what is more important as far as the other thing that you mentioned about intellectual activity. Surely human beings, male and female, need intellectual activity in their lives, but if being a homemaker or being homebound is somehow makes it impossible to be intellectually active, how do the speakers explain Emily Dickinson or the Brontes or any female writer?
The writers the speaker mentioned were saddled with an infant. I challenged the speaker to spend 24 hours with a screaming, colicky baby and see how intellectually stimulated he feels. Good question.
Just as a return to that, I'd like to point out that the speaker hates
It certainly wouldn't be much of a match of wits.
In the earlier part of the question session, Mr. Torres seemed to state that a woman should spend the time between her graduation from high school and her marriage involved in some sort of higher education so that she could possibly at some later date become involved in the workforce. How does the speaker explain advances in certain fields such as law or medicine should a woman choose to enter those fields? If she takes a break in order to have children and raise a family, it would require her to return to education before she returned to the workforce. And in doing so, that places her under an unnecessary, sort of unequal amount of stress compared to her husband, who has remained in the workforce. So I suppose what I'm asking is it fair to arbitrarily state that if a woman has a child, the woman must take time out of her career to stay with the child, as opposed to making the decision with her husband?
I'm not sure that the speaker really listened to my reflections that accurately, because if she had, she would have realized the emphasis I was putting on was not on the material benefits of an education, but the intangible benefits of an education that simply make us better people, not necessarily better worker ants. And as far as the actual material benefits go, I would let Mr. Harper reflect to that. But before I do so, I would like to say that as far as what you were just saying, something about go ahead.
My answer is yes. Can you arbitrarily state that to be true? Yes, according to feminist logic. Everything that feminism argues, whether through essentialism or through the social construction theory, is that there's still a glass ceiling. Women still make less than men. Women still have a harder time excelling in the workforce. It's still male-dominated, and it takes a more calloused individual to advance in the workplace. This is what contemporary feminism argues today and has for the last 30 years. If that argument is true, then yes. Why advance? If you're looking at it practically, if you're looking at it as which member of our family is going to stay home, you're looking at it economically. Well, who's going to make more money? Who's going to advance in the marketplace easier? Well, feminist theory says males will. It thus follows that women would stay home. Why? Not because they're weak or because they're better with children or because men are calloused and can't handle children very well, but if you're stuck in a situation where one person has to be in the workplace, which is the situation we have now because you don't have subsidized childcare and because you don't have corporate America accepting dual employment like a lot of European companies do, that's the situation you're stuck with. It's not the ideal, as we've been arguing all night. There is no ideal situation. This is the practicality of it, and if you want to apply feminist logic to it, either spectrum of the extremes of feminism, both would carry the same logic that the workforce is still male-dominated, therefore the woman should stay at home. It's not a sexist issue, it's an economic argument for practicality.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
So basically, what you're saying is that instead of remaining in the workforce and attempting to change what I assume we all perceive as an unequal situation, the glass ceiling, the 80 cents on the dollar, women should retire gracefully to the home instead of challenging things that they see as unfair.
Most certainly.
Okay, now we're going to have an audience question period where you can direct questions to either team. But I would like to state that I would like to remind the audience that this is an academic debate, and you need to ask questions based on the merits of each argument.
Thank you. One of the focal points of the opposition's argument was for the advance of society economically. Well, the issue at hand is the the advancement of the family as a unit. I mean, that is the most important thing in the as what the argument is for. People of Afghanistan have realized that, and as not putting much emphasis on famine, as putting emphasis on development of the family unit. Given this, does not the opposition have to agree with this? Because over the past 50 years that we've seen the United States grow economically through women entering the workplace, we've seen the deterioration of the family unit. And prior to this, when women were in the home, it was not as bad. Isn't it? Does not the opposition have to concede that women in the home is better for the family unit and for the development of the family?
I'll respond to that. To your point about Afghanistan, yes, the family is valued there. However, there are so many problems associated with that society that came from a literal regression. They have traveled back in time almost 20 years, and that is unacceptable. To put a value of family over the value of the nation as a whole, over the value of economics, is, in a way, it doesn't make logical sense. Women being at home, we've conceded, yes, it may be a good idea, but it must be a choice. It must come from a conscious decision, economically taking all those factors into consideration in order to do that.
Mr. Green, this question is directed at you. I have personally found my own questions here. My father had two parents, but he learned how to love from my grandpa, not my grandma, who was, by the way, a very big bitch. And he never showed him any love nor support. He got all his love and caring from my grandpa. So my question is, I mean, what I'm getting, the sense I'm getting is that men seem to be morally unfit to kind of direct children to be raised with good moral values, because if men don't stay at home and men work, then where are they, giving support to their children? I mean, could you possibly see the fact that maybe men should stay at home, maybe they have more to give to their children than maybe women?
Well, I can't really see the fact, as our argument is based upon the economic fact that women earn less and their return to the home would provide for the family. However, on a personal level, I can say my father was a screw-up and his father was a screw-up, and I'm probably not going to have any kids, so then I can't screw up. That's all I can say.
y'all assume that y'all say that it's just a purely economical reason that you think that the woman should stay at home because the man can make more money. Well, assuming that I have a college degree and I'm going to go on to get an MBA, and the person that I may marry is a painter and makes far less money than I, so then should he stay at home and I support my family because I am going to make far more money than he is? If it's purely an economical reasoning, then I'd say that the woman's place isn't in the home. It's the person that can make the most money should go out and work for us, and the person that is making the least should stay at home.
And that's precisely our argument. That
Right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the woman.
according to feminist theory, it does.
Right, but intellectually, I have the college degree, I will have the MBA degree, and I will make more money than the person that I'm dating. So I should work and he should stay at home. Right.
Feminist theory would argue that, as a footnote, you recall that we said we weren't arguing our views, we were arguing an argument. And that argument stemming from feminism is that this is the case and that you need to go back and that you should allow the male counterpart to advance in the workplace simply because it will be easier and it will actually be an investment in the long run for you to go into the home now or when you have kids or whenever and to let him go.
But you're assuming that that he is way smarter than me.
Exactly, that's what feminist theory assumes, and that's our argument.
It just doesn't make any sense if I'm the one that's about to graduate from college and he's the one that has had a few classes and failed them.
I think the real question is, how good a painter is he? The real question is, how good of a painter is he?
Wonderful painter, but he makes $30,000, or so a year, and I'll make $80,000,
Okay, let's try and keep questions to one question, and then we can raise your hand again afterwards.
There you go. Y'all, as in the females, I've been a little southern with our you all this evening. But y'all made the argument that it's the woman's right to go into the workforce and succeed, grab the corporate coat by the times, grab it and hold on for your life. Whereas you're saying, it's my job, like it's up to me. I need to fulfill this in my life. I need to go succeed. But screw my kid. Like how selfish of an argument is it to say that I need this for me. For me, I need to be able to succeed. For me, the female species, I won't say that, the female gender, for that, I need to succeed, and I need to do that at the loss of my child. When does being a mother become more important than succeeding and being as good, if not better, than the man? Is being a mother, is that important? Is that a critical thing? Is being a mother not more important than being the CEO of Yahoo? Well, one day you might if you work hard enough and don't go home, you could become Yahoo's CEO, make millions of dollars. Your kids could have that BMW in high school, and it'd be great. And then you take the BMW and the Glock 97 that he bought and go kill everybody because mom never kissed him. I mean, this is all extreme, but is being a mother, is it devalued? Like, are y'all devaluing being a mother?
Can we talk?
Let me finish it.
Are you done, Mr. Beasley?
Yeah, never.
Okay, I know he's never done. I challenge Mr. Beasley to consider whether it's better to have a mother who attempts to do it all and is intellectually stimulated by her career and also enjoys being with her children, or if it would be better to have a mother who, because of the male force in her life saying you must stay home and raise children, resents her position, resents her children, and needs a prescription for Valium or any of the other rampant antidepressants that are around these days that unhappy housewives tend to take.
I want to talk a little more. But I think you missed it. Who's more important, your child or you? Is it more important that you succeed or that you let your child succeed?
Statistics have shown that adequate child care, if you do the research, can help your children to obtain the same mental and intellectual levels that any child with a stay-at-home mother could achieve. It does, just because your mother goes to work does not mean you're going to become a psychopath. They're not the same. There are plenty of functional individuals who are like that. And anyway, the statistics do show an increase in crime since mothers have gone to work, but those two are not necessarily connected. I mean,
They're not causal.
they're not causal at all. I mean, there's also statistics that show that self-esteem of children, which has been the main force, the main thing that psychologists have shown have led to moral decay of our society, is mainly instilled in children by their fathers. That the fathers are really the driving force in ensuring that these children feel good about themselves and secure in their place in the world. And I think that the argument.
Ms. Freeborn?
This is a gentleman I try to understand, but you made the argument at what, or in rebuttal to a question asked of you, you said, at what point do you sit down and tell your children you are not enough? Well, my question to you is then, if it is just predestined that the man is supposed to, the male or the father is supposed to be the provider in working and the mother is supposed to stay home, then isn't the father, or would you feel that the father is underlyingly saying, you're not enough, I need to fulfill this for myself, or, I need to provide for my family, so being with you and staying at home is not enough?
No, I don't believe that's the case at all, and I think I made it clear in my speech that while fathers tend to have this responsibility, this desire to provide for the children, that does not encompass the be-all, end-all of being a father, because, I mean, that's, my father was a workaholic and, disappeared for a couple of years here and there and all of that, but he was also very active in my life, outside of which, just because you work 12 hours a day, I take a few caffeine pills, go out and coach football. Or, a father necessarily has to do these things. And is not saying to his child, I work this hard because I need this for me.
So why does the mother, is my question?
Why does the
Why
mother?
would the mother be saying that if she went out to work, is my question.
Because that's almost the entire argument that we've heard from this side, is that I'm doing this not for my children, but for my own intellectual stimulation, for my own self-esteem, for the better economic situation. And we've already gone over that both roles do need to be filled. And whether you want to call it social construction, which I don't think is the case, whether you want to call it economics, which I'm personally not, even though for the sake of argument, I'm convinced. I don't see how there's a difference. A man does this, and a woman does that. And whether or not it's a question of, it's not because I, as the man, have said this, it's not because you, as the woman, have overcome the system and made it the case. It's simply inherent humanistic natural qualities and the necessities of making life in a world that's not well for everyone.
Okay, this is wise to all three of you and your take on your argument based on economic theory and so forth. Let's say that I'm married and I earn $100,000 and my husband earns, let's say he earns, I don't know, between 10 and 20,000 a year. And let's talk about the marriage penalty. Are you going to tell me that, and I have 2 kids, are you going to tell me that I expect him to work when it doesn't actually pay off for him to work in the workforce because, we don't have subsidized child care, and it would actually pay for him to stay home and take care of the kids because I'm earning more money? What would you do in a situation like that?
The point at which the male stayed in the home and you would hypothetically advance in your career, that is what our argument would say was a mistake. At that point, you should have stayed home and your husband should have gone forth because at this time, as you made $100,000, he would be making $200 or have more
No,
benefits.
but let's say that he isn't college educated and I am.
Well,
Are you
then
going
the
to say
mistake
that I should
according-
put him,
yeah.
am I supposed to pay for him to and then neither one of us work?
Yes, the feminist argument. You got to allow the answer, like a bit of logic here. The feminism argument, the argument is what we're arguing. We're not arguing our views, and the feminist argument would say that it would be a better investment to go back and have the male fulfill that role. They would argue that it's just a better investment. If he would make 100, he might make 120, or he might get there more easily or quicker, or what have you. The feminist argument argues that it's easier for the male to progress. So if you made 100, he could have made 150.
So what do you think about the idea, though, getting back to the marriage penalty? Don't you think, like, instead of actually, let's say I have 2 kids and I'm married, it would pay off, like, if I got a divorce and we still lived together and had a relationship, because I could earn 100,000, he could earn 30, and we wouldn't be taxed at a higher rate. Well, that's against the whole family values and the morality behind a family and how today's society is actually progressing.
Of course, but that value is socially constructed. And that's what feminism argues, and because it's socially constructed, the male would be dominant.
That's not dominant in the household. If someone's earning more money and is earning more bread and butter.
Okay, I think we need another question.
Yeah, sure. The opposition cited several things in support that the ideal of equality in the workplace could be reached. It seemed to be kind of a prop for your argument. And one of these ideas was that of the Industrial Revolution, seeing that women were brought into the workplace to add hands into the factories. My question would be, how would you respond to, for example, the European Industrial Revolution? And for sourcing on this, I'm using the French film Germinal, where it basically wasn't really equality because they were forced by necessity into the workforce by aristocracy. They were forced, in the film at least, to work in coal mines. As a matter of fact, even the children were forced to work in these coal mines. And in the film, and I'll argue also in real life, as it were, both the women and the children were taken great advantage of in this workplace. As a matter of fact, one of the children was raped. How would you respond?
I'm not sure if that was a speech or a question, but I'll try to answer it. We stated in my argument, had you listened carefully, that nothing done out of necessity is an ideal situation. Women being forced to go to work as single parents is not ideal. In an ideal world, there would be a choice. And it is our responsibility as a society to make sure women have those choices, to make sure affordable childcare is available, to make sure that it is an option for women to stay home if they choose to do so. And so the example from the Industrial Revolution, and it happened, women were forced to go to work here as well during World War II, during the Industrial Revolution. None of those are ideal, so they do set precedents for women being in the workplace and establishing a place in that structure. And we did state that nothing done out of sheer necessity was ideal, but today, with the strong economy, with women waiting later to be married, that the choice should be available, and it is a more viable option today than it would have been at that point in time.
Okay, I'd like to remind everyone that after this we have a vote, and if you leave, please catch the door on your way out so it's not distracting to either speaker. But I myself have a question that I would like to direct. First of all, I would like to correct Mr. Harper on his feminist perceptions. You are quoting a very conservative feminist perspective, and there are many different degrees, brands, sects, whatever, if you will, of feminism. Secondly, as a political scientist, I have recently read an article entitled Women, Work, and Political Participation written by 2 political scientists. And the premise of the entire article is that women who work are indeed happier, they participate more in society, they contribute, than homemakers. And since women comprise slightly over the majority of American citizens, that is, I think, a vitally necessary part to our political socialization and how policy is created and formed in this country. And as a woman, I would like to say that I do not want any man deciding what is right for me through policy. And since women who do work participate more than women who don't, I don't see how that would be bad. I'm just curious what you think on that.
I can sort of comment on it. There's a variety of topics that you got in there. I agree with you both on the point of legislation, both on the point of a man should not be telling a woman what to do. That's not an equal relationship. Our argument is that the two would make a decision together based on economic practicality and so on and so forth of what the best decision would be. Commenting on the feminism element of it, I think it's especially the statistic you gave really indicated a sort of shift in our society that's happened over the last 30 years as what you might be more familiar with as Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. You've got this reoccurring theme of surrounding opinions of truth that shift. Well, now you have that same phenomenon occurring with what is valued in society. What are women more valued for? And in the 50s and 60s, women were considered more productive if they were in the household because there was an economic value to that while the male was out. But now that reality has shifted, just as Virginia Woolf seemed to predict that it would, to this new perspective that economic prosperity equals productivity. So if women are thus in the workforce, they're considered more productive, whereas in the 50s, it would be widely acknowledged that the most productive woman would be this superwoman who was able to cook, clean, and what have you, but still have a career. So I think your question is, I mean, it's right on point, and it indicates that shift that is so crucial to what has happened with feminism, and especially over the last 40 years, it seems like it's gone full circle, just as Virginia Woolf indicated that it would. That shift in reality, which might be socially constructed, or what have you, we can argue that at another time, has indeed shifted, and it has changed our perceptions of reality and what productivity is. So you're right.
Ms. Sewell?
Thank you. A number of you keep harping on the fact that you're using a reality-based argument. However, forcing a woman's place doesn't necessarily foster a better society because not all women are innately good at or want to raise children. Take, for instance, the main character in The Awakening, but they do, in fact, become mothers, and this doesn't necessarily mean they're raising good children. However, if you force a woman who is a mother to be in the home and you encourage the glass ceilings that we've been talking about, which harms women who don't choose to become mothers, and that you've excluded from this argument. Now, considering the fact that these people are a very real part of society, how can you negate their rights? I mean, are you saying that these people, just because they don't procreate, are not contributing to society and that it's okay to negate their rights?
We weren't arguing that that was a view. We were saying that that was at one time a view, and our reality argument is indeed based on a shift in that reality. That view of reality has changed, and we're not arguing that that's productive. We're not arguing what a good or bad mother is. We're just arguing that the views of that role shape our reaction to women. So if I'm a husband, I have been brought up in this society that has shaped my views, and my reality and my reaction to my wife's decision to go in the workforce will be shaped by that. So we're not arguing that that's the case. We're just arguing that there's a shift and people react to it.
We'll have a couple more questions. We'll go in about 8 minutes. Mr. McRae.
Back in the 50s, back in the 50s, it was okay to have one source of income. Two sources of income were not even necessary to buy a home, to have a car, to have a successful family life. Now, two sources of income seem to be. How would you evaluate that in light of the problems in society? And would indeed having women voluntarily return to the home solve that?
I'm not exactly sure. You're asking two questions. If women voluntarily return to the home, would you get the sort of 50s feel? That was the last question you asked, not in there. But before that, were you asking whether or not the single-parent affluence of the 50s was responsible for the familiar stability? Or
In other words, it seems that society realistically does not really have a choice. That we can't have women going back into the household because that will just contribute to poverty more than anything else. And poverty, it seems, is no more a good influence for children than good parents.
this is my favorite statistic, and I always use it whether it's relevant or not. And that is, the United States has roughly 5% of the world's population. It sits upon roughly three-quarters of the world's natural resources. Poverty, even at an American standard, I mean, compared to Indians, we're going to be doing all right. First off, so that whether or not, I think that really what we have to look at is, my colleagues are more into the economic side of things than I am because they're Mammonites and greedy people, and that's fine. But really how I look at it is morally. I mean, in the 50s, have we really progressed as a society? As individuals, have we become better individuals? Have we become better society? Have we become greater human beings in the last 50 years? And I would argue no, that there's been no progress, that the actual, despite how much richer we've become, how much more luxuries we have, we've actually stepped back in the fact that we as a society no longer understood whether or not it was right or wrong. Across the 50s, more or less, there was an understanding of what a man was and what a woman was. If we don't think what that is right now, you know, 50 years experience later, we can say, oh, well, this is wrong, this is wrong. But back then, there was an understanding, there was a unity, and you could answer that question from household to household and get something of a similar answer. And that's the value that we've lost in this progression, regression, whatever you want to call it. We have no longer what Mr. Gass's question was talking about. And no, I mean, you can't reconstruct something and understand like that right away. But in an individual family basis, then I do believe that yes, if the woman said, look, I mean, what would it be like to be growing up and one day, you know, your mother tells you, you know, I could have made an extra $100,000 for this family and, you know, we could be going on vacations every weekend in Paris and all that. But you know what? I didn't because I want you to be a better person. I don't want my son to go out and do all the things that, you know, Johnny down the street does, smoking crack and whatnot. So that's
I'd just like to throw in a get your traitor on there.
For the sake of time, we need to see a hand vote on how many people would like to keep up questions. So, how many people have questions versus how many people would like to vote now?
Raise your hand if you want to ask a question.
And if you'd like to vote now?
What is the vote? The vote determines which side we think did a better job of presenting our argument.
As usual, we're indecisive.
We got like 5-1 with 30 abstentions.
You can ask questions that we really need to ask questions.
Amanda? I guess I have a question for the gentleman, but it's just more of a definition of term. It seems like, especially our guests here, are going to equate sex with gender. And as modern feminists have been stating many times, that sex doesn't necessarily equate gender, where you have biology of male and female, and then you have the gender of men and women, but there are crosses between these. I mean, I'm sure everyone's met an aggressive female who has literal no maternal qualities or maternal desires, where you have men who have very nurturing, not necessarily, but are just more nurturing and more that have better qualities towards their children. So I don't see how you could automatically put women in this biological position, you know, and it's a whole nature versus nurture argument, and you're just making this huge fallacy of equating sex and gender, which is not necessarily true, and I'm sure most people would disagree.
Well, that's the essentialist argument. We argue both the essentialist and the socially constructed argument. What you just asked me is that link between gender and behavior, gender and sex, gender and the roles of are there, whether they've been created or not. That's the essentialist argument. That's the essentialist argument that woman equals this sex, male equals this sex equals these characteristics. And we've argued both sides of the feminist argument here. One is that you're correct, that that doesn't exist, that behavior is dictated by environment, social construction, etc. And on the other hand, we've also argued, even if it is that men act this way and women act this way, both of those angles, from one extreme end of feminism to the other, both point to the same answer.
Which is?
Reality.
Maybe your reality is different than my reality. Obviously, there's some.
Yeah, that's true, but I think you're missing the point. Reality is shaped by all of us. That's the Virginia Woolf argument. If you're well versed in your feminism, you know to the lighthouse pointed to social construction on central reality.
I haven't read The Lighthouse, but I have studied economics and political science, and I think that I have just as much of a right to study that as much as I do to stay at home with my children when I do so.
Ms. Bradshaw has been waiting for a while.
Okay, I have a couple things to say. First of all, I would like you to go back and read up on feminism, because if you've read anything about feminism, it would say yes, there is a glass ceiling, but no, we should not go back into the home. We should not take the path of least resistance. That's what feminism is. And I would also like to ask if you realize that your white heterosexual male economics, capitalism has put women in the workforce. Do you understand that?
I need to keep this to a respectful level.
I'm really curious.
I just like to say we're not oppressing you right now. Thank you.
All right, new question.
Well, no, I want to say something about that. If our white heterosexual power structure put you there, then doesn't it make sense that our white heterosexual power structure can take you out?
Okay, this is obviously completely regressed. At this point, we need to ready to vote, and the vote is based on merits of each argument, not on how much you agree or disagree.
You can ask, I'm just shaking. Sorry.
Economical basis, what at the cost of living, cost of college.
Hey guys,
If you're still looking in the best interest of the child, you want them to have an education. How are you going to afford that if you've only got one parent working?
Well, it depends on how they're working. Education, affordable, I think. My father worked primarily, and this wasn't even a very lucrative career, simply in the military as an enlisted man, and my mother worked nominally towards the end of this, only even the last couple of years. I go to a very expensive school, so it can be tough.
On behalf of the Model United Nations Collins, I'd like to thank the gentleman from Hampton City for coming tonight. I can speak for the members of my organization. We've learned a lot. We've been forced to look at a new issue from a new perspective, and that is a valuable academic endeavor, no matter which side of the argument you end up being on. And we thank the Union Philanthropic Society for challenging us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Thank you very much.
Rob, do you have any comments?
Before you leave and have any conclusions about us, we're simply presenting arguments. We're not presenting what we feel. We sat down and looked at what feminism had to say and what we thought it had to say, and we're not here to sort of spout our own views. We're sort of presenting an argument for the purpose of discussion, because that's what we believe in. We believe that we should challenge each other with the arguments that you might not even believe in or agree with, but that's what we're doing. So anybody whose plans on going outside and cutting our car tires, please.
Yeah, I think think that girl that stormed out made it stop on my call.
Does anyone else have a ballot?
Turn the pencil.
Scary in a bad sense. Yeah, we didn't. They had some pretty rude things too. We didn't start the rumble. We just I know. Oh, you won. Like we did this. Like, well, we could have been a pile. There was way less of that.
Well, actually, never mind.
John,
All right.
yeah, you